Now, what can I tell you about the next man who's about to walk out here? He's just a genius on two legs. I'm in awe of him, to be quite honest with you. I mean, what songwriter in the world would not want to have written, I'm reviewing the situation, or you've got to pick a pocket or two, you've got to pick a pocket or two. And what songwriter in the world would not have given his eye teeth to have written a musical called Oliver? And that's only one of his works. Please welcome Lionel Bart. You're not a songwriter, Lionel, you are a legend.
A legend, right.
A legend, as Gary Glitter once called himself.
That's
No,
right.
but you're head and shoulders above them all. I don't know if you agree with that. I mean, if somebody mentions bring these for British songwriters, and people say Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, I go, ah, you know what I mean? Maybe you think they're geniuses, but I mean, you've done some marvelous stuff. Well, how do you compare yourself to people like Andrew Lloyd Webber?
I don't compare myself to anybody.
No, you're probably absolutely right. That's an unfair question.
It's, I get up in the morning, I say, right, I know who I am today, and I get through the day.
Yeah.
And if I start comparing myself to who I was yesterday, I'd be in trouble.
You've had some life. And recently, there's been an amazing revival of Oliver, starting last year, at the end of last year.
Yes.
In London. But it was very significant for you as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had a great big success with Oliver this time around. It's really booking into 1996, I do believe.
It's something like 10 million quid advanced bookings.
Oh, I don't count the money, but I think it's something like that. Yeah, it's doing very well indeed. And it's a whole new resurgence. It's a new production. I spent a lot of time rewriting dialogue and new incidental music. And we've sort of taken a 1995 look at it.
Could I ask you something?
Yeah.
Would you ever consider rewriting some of the songs? I mean, are they sacrosanct? Are they just perfect? They seem to be.
Nothing is sacrosanct, really. If it works, great.
Could you
if it works, you don't have to fix it, right? You don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
but on the other hand, if something good happens and it feels better, you've got to be open. It was tough for me in this particular new production. I had to go in. At night, I sacked everybody at night in my head. The next morning, I'd go in and say, no, that's not the name of the game. And I used to turn up in the morning and just say, how can I enhance your vision of my work? And just go in there with some love. And we've grown something that I'm very pleased with.
What is your favorite song in Oliver?
Well, it's tough. I mean, the first song I ever wrote for Oliver was The Kid's Prayer. I wrote it in a car. It's called Where Is Love?
Yeah.
But that is the root song of the whole score. All the other songs really belong on it. But one of the songs I kind of like, because it's helped me out of trouble when I've not been feeling so hot, is a song called Who Will Buy?
Yeah. Now, we just happen to have a little man over here called Dave Gold. He's not so little.
Dave, I know Dave.
And he's got a piano. Maybe perhaps...
I know Dave from a long time ago. Cost a packet. It's cool. We tried to do a show about...
Did he cost you money?
He didn't cost me a thing. I mean, it's the days when I was having a jar, you know. So my body was there, my head wasn't there very much. But I did write a couple of songs. I'm going to sing you the song Who Will Buy?
Sure.
It's a croak, but I'll have a go.
Oh, I like croakers. Right, Dave, a little tinkle there would be in order.
Who will buy this wonderful morning? Such a sky you never did see. Who will tie it up with a ribbon and put it in a box for me, so I could see it at my leisure whenever things go wrong, and I will keep it as a treasure to last my whole life long. Who will buy this wonderful feeling? I'm so high, I swear I could fly. Me, oh my, I don't want to lose it. So what am I to do to keep the sky so blue? There must be someone who will Pa.
That's a song.
I nearly sung Who About His Wonderful Finger.
What happened to your finger?
Don't you know, I just cut myself shaving.
But you always
no, seriously.
No, seriously, did you cut your, obviously you cut your, did you cut that or did you...
You gotta know that it looks like a joke wound, doesn't it?
It's like one of those joke
It's like one of those old
things.
guys with the couch.
Did you just do that before you come on here? Because, I mean, you're okay earlier on.
I sure did. I sure did. You see, what I've been trying to get dressed for you. That's what it is.
Looks as if that finger's about 4 inches longer than the other ones.
Well, I thought there was no point in carrying on hiding it. That's it, finger. Look, finger.
You know this old rogue over here, Dave Gold. Dave Gold, give him a hand. Come on, play on the piano. I was talking to Chris Akabusi earlier, and he said he enjoyed the occasional little drop of wine. You did at one stage, only your occasional little drop of wine lasted about maybe 15 to 20 years, didn't it?
I never knew what a little drop of wine was. I still don't know what a little drop is.
Were you heavy on the old wobbly water?
Yeah, I'm one of the people that used to won't. Given I have a chance, probably still would. Go over the top for these things, you know? I'm what they call an excessive person. Except on May the 1st, it was like 10 years. 10 years since I stopped doing any of that. That's just one day at a time, as they say.
You had this marvelous success with Oliver. You know, it was a touch of genius. And then you tried to follow it up with musicals like Blitz and Twang, and maybe perhaps they weren't as successful. But then you lost everything, basically, in a nutshell, didn't you?
It's a long old story.
Yeah.
It's a long old horror story, really, but I just gave it away. I mean, Blitz was a huge success, actually.
Okay.
There's 23 productions of it on now in England.
I'm sorry, excuse
because
me.
But Twang sure was a flop, but they want to do that now, you see. I'm having my renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I just got fed up with the rat race, and it's just a story where I just decided to give myself a hard time, and it's over.
Well, you're too generous. I mean, those were heady days in the 60s. I mean, you were Jack the Lad, really, weren't you?
Well, the truth of the matter is I never used to like money.
Really?
Well, yes, I used to think it was for spending and give it away. It's largely because my old man was a gambler, you know?
Yeah.
A really bad gambler.
And what kind of things did you do? I mean, did you just fritter it, as they say?
Oh, listen, it's legend.
And the Music Man, frittering away.
My part, frittering away. Right here in River City.
That's right. That's one of my favourite things.
Do
you like that?
Sure.
I think it's...
Sure. Well, now, the thing is, it's all history with the money.
Yeah.
I gave it away. They said you're earning so much a minute. I thought, well, I'll spend half of that a minute. And I did, and I couldn't.
One of the things that brought you back, actually, funnily enough, back from, well, maybe perhaps obscurity, was an ad you did for the Abbey National.
That's right. Somebody asked me to do this song.
Wasn't that a stroke of genius? I keep saying genius, but genius, the word genius always comes to me whenever I talk about you. No matter, I mean, you're always involved in something that's a stroke of genius, whether it's by somebody else or yourself.
Well, you see, I don't know what the word genius really means. All I know is that with me and my work, drunk, sober, straight, whatever, now, then, perhaps more so now, I always look for the child. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, everyone's 12 years old until they prove something different.
Yeah.
And I try and go for the truth, for the curiosity of a child, the renewal, the change, the openness to change that a child has. And I think we should all go for that.
Yeah. Do you remember that ad, all the little kids? And you sat on the piano. What, do you remember?
Give yourself a pinch. Do-do, do-do. Yes, it's really you. Do-do, do-do. Yes, you're really here. Do-do, do-do. Yes, it's really true. Do-do.
Lionel, stay with us for a moment. Stay there for a second. Lionel Bart. Okay. Give him a hand. Come on, give him another hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want Lionel to stay here, but I want to introduce him to a man who he knows already. Another songwriter. Successful as well. He's a chap, he's just behind. If I could see what that was, I could nearly see. He started out, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, he started out as a Bob Dylan clone, but he soon found his own path with huge hits like Mellow Yellow, Sunshine Superman, and a whole lot of other ones. Conquered the States and became a symbol of the flower power movement. And like all genuinely talented men, he now lives in Ireland. Please welcome Donovan. Hello, sir.
How are you doing?
Now, I know you two know each other,
Very well.
and I know that actually Lionel has been visiting you in Cork.
Yes, these last 2 days.
That's right.
I came with his birthday present. It was his birthday yesterday.
I'm
Yeah,
surprised
my
to see that.
birthday.
Yes. You've been living in Cork for a long time, haven't you?
I've lived in Cork, in Ireland now these last 4 years, but I've been here before.
You were one of the first people to come here, actually, because I remember in Dublin around about 1970 or 71, I remember I was in a boutique one time trying to figure out if I could afford to buy something. And somebody said to me, "There's Donovan." And I looked around and you were standing there, and I said, "So it is."
This was 1971, 2
Right
and
about
3,
that.
and this was the greatest discovery I found in those years because I thought I'll take some time over in Ireland. And so we rented a house. And what we found was an amazing kind of 60s happening in Ireland.
That's right.
Now this was the traditional revival was about to burst open with great artists like Christy Moore and the rest of the boys in a band called Planksty.
That's right.
Now I knew about these lads, but I hadn't met them. And then to see Dublin in those years was wonderful. We had a marvellous time.
It's before it became totally cosmopolitan. It
Yes.
had retained the old character. I mean, the old pubs were still there with the same kind of old people in them.
Yes, I
But
was
the-
looking for Yeats and Joyce and all those guys.
Now, the old pubs are still there, but they're full of Americans and Germans and stuff, you know.
Well, yeah.
But that's okay.
Oh, it was a wonderful time. And I find Ireland still a wonderful place. And when I came back from California in 1990, Linda and I and the kids had grown up, we were on our own, we came back and we looked for something that we recognized in England,
Yeah.
that we remembered, that we loved, and found that when we came to Ireland, what we remembered was here, and so we moved.
It had passed on in England.
It passed on in the southern counties. Of course, Lionel is a London boy, and London has adopted Lionel, and Lionel's adopted London, and I think it's your home. I think.
Well, listen, I've also got a thing about the Irish music. I always have had.
Would you be a man who could possibly live in Cork for a year or two, Lionel?
I could handle it very much. I love it. I love it.
Do you like Irish music?
Yes, well, you know, it's the Celtic music. It's very similar to the old Hebrew music.
Of course it is.
And I feel close to the roots of that music, sure.
Yeah. Donovan, you were here at a good time, really, because, I mean, that started, it was bubbling underneath.
Yeah.
I mean, it took a long time for it to get out there. I mean, there was a time, perhaps in the mid-60s, when a chap would not have been very happy to be seen carrying a fiddle. And then it all changed round about that, and people
Well,
started to get back into their roots, you know, now.
Well, I tell you, in 1970, I'd already written a song and titled it Celtic Rock.
Really?
And what I'd done was I'd fused rhythms, the rock ensemble, which
Yeah.
is drums, bass, guitars, piano.
Uh-huh.
But I'd early on wanted to fuse my roots, which is Scottish and Irish,
Sure.
through my father and mother in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And although I adopted American music for maybe a couple of years, Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, Joan Baez, and a bit of Dylan, my real roots started to show.
Sure.
Like here, you know. No, my real roots started to show, and I fused the music in 1970. And I think the Irish musicians felt that, and they embraced me in 1970 and 71 and 2. And I presented Planksty on a tour then. And Christy Moore, whenever I'm in a concert of his, and he knows I'm there, he always says, this is for a gentleman in the audience who introduced me on the stage in 1970. Of course, that was about to happen anyway. It was about to happen.
I remember I was talking to a fellow the other day and your name came up in the conversation. He's a BBC producer actually on Radio 1 in London. And he was telling me, and he was actually he thought this was quite odd when he thought about it. He said when he was very young, he's not a lot old now, he said the first time he ever went to see Bob Dylan was because somebody told him that he was a bit like Donovan. And that's why he went. Were you conscious at the very start? I mean, there was the Donovan hat,
Oh yeah.
you know, and you know, did you regard yourself as being consciously...
Well, I didn't go to the thrift store or the surplus store and grab a bunch of clothes and say, right, here comes Dylan. What I was doing was I was hitchhiking around the country and singing Woody Guthrie songs, and was aware of the jeans and the hat and all that. When I was actually compared with Bobby, it was a surprise to him when he arrived that year of 1965.
Yeah, because that documentary, Don't Look Back, what do you call it, with Penny Baker? He kept saying, who's this guy, Donovan?
Yeah,
Where is
well, he was actually...
I can remember when Don came along, and sure, for 5 minutes, or maybe a couple of
5 minutes, yeah.
he was Britain's answer to Bobby Zimmerman, yeah?
Yes, he was, of course, but I mean...
Then he became his answer to himself, you see, that's what happened.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I was saying. I mean, you found your own voice, but I mean, at that time...
There's funny emphasis on syllables that nobody else does, you know what I mean? Bob Dylan doesn't do what he does.
No, we were completely different musical entities, but we were linked through this beatnik bohemian Woody Guthrie thing. And the odd thing is, Dylan was such a copyist of Woody Guthrie when he began.
Of course he was, yeah.
But it was easy enough to link us together, like the Beatles were linked with the Everly Brothers and Buddy Holly.
Yeah, right.
Cliff Richard was definitely linked to Elvis. And these things are easily done. But it was hurtful in one sense, but it was powering in another, because it made me want to stand up and say, I've got this.
All right, then.
You might think it's just that, but I've got this.
And there was your man Pete Seeger.
Pete Seeger.
I think a strong influence on all
Well, Pete Seeger was the one with Joan Baez that actually gave me the stamp of approval by inviting me to the Newport Folk Festival at 18 years of age. Now that's quite a thing. As Joan Baez had introduced Bob Dylan on the stage of Newport in '62,
That's right.
we all forget that Joan Baez actually was there well before any of us. She was there in 1960. No, Lionel started before then.
He did indeed. Donovan, we'll hear you singing a little song later on, actually, which kind of started you off. But in the meantime, thank you very much. Thank you, Lionel Bart.
Thank you.
Thank you.